Hello indie game fans! Dark Souls has been a huge inspiration for many game developers, with elements of that creeping into everything from platformers to action-adventure titles, so here are the top 10 best 2D Souls-like titles, starting with Hollow Knight. This will be very familiar to fans of the channel, since it is one of my all-time favorite indie games and gets its place on the list since I consider it more Metroidvania in nature, although you can certainly see the Souls-like influence on this, with things like having to do corpse runs and the moody atmosphere. The other aspect that I greatly enjoyed is the horrifying and challenging boss fights, another cornerstone of the genre, but because it lacks a stamina-based combat system, it doesn't quite fit, but an excellent game nonetheless. A little bit more of a niche one with Void Memory, a side-scrolling action platformer with a focus on boss fights. This one's a little rough around the edges, with some poorly translated dialogue, but the combat and enemy designs look interesting and could fill that gap if you're looking for something new. It has a moody setting where you have to explore this world of darkness in search of relics, but with challenging fights that require pattern recognition and swift execution, this could be one to check out. Another one which feels very much like a Souls game is Titan Souls, where our protagonist is a lone archer armed with a single arrow, and has to use it to slay titanic bosses. Of course, the highlight of these games are the boss fights, with a number of tough and memorable ones here. The satisfying feeling of defeating a tough boss is amplified, since you have to find that one opening to fire that shot, really feeling awesome when you succeed. On top of this, there are secrets to uncover as well, but for a focused title with an interesting gimmick, cannot go wrong with this one. Top-down games are not usually my thing, but one that I often see missed out on is DARKMAUS, which, essentially, is a mouse-based Souls-like title. You wake up shipwrecked on an island, armed with only a toothpick and a shield, and have to explore the area while fighting off bugs and other horrid rats. A large variety in weapons, from swords, spears, bows, polearms and more, with the trademark skill-based combat that really punishes you if you get too greedy. Very simple visually, but that just accentuates the gameplay even more. One of the criminally overlooked titles or series is SKAUTFOLD by developer Parkware, with SHROUDED and SANITY being the most Souls-like iteration. Explore an ancient haunted estate where a strange madness of cosmic proportions has taken over. While Souls-like in nature with stamina, rolling, parrying, and corpse runs, this does also have some influence from the survival horror genre in Resident Evil as well, in both the design of the estate and the vibe of the game. However, not so creepy and more action-oriented, with stylish pixel art to boot. Similar to Hollow Knight above, Blasphemous is not exactly Souls-like in terms of mechanics, lacking in the all-important stamina-based combat system, but what it does with the world building, setting, and grotesque visuals nails every other aspect. Steeped in religious influences from Spanish Catholic beliefs, play as the penitent one, the lone survivor of the massacre of the Silent Sorrow as you seek to lift the curse of the miracle on the land. Similar ambiguous storytelling through item descriptions and environmental clues, but the highlight has to be the pixel art, which manages to depict all manner of horrifying enemies. This feels great in terms of the controls and the weight of the combat, and is a no-brainer for this list. One of the more pleasant redemption stories in games comes from Death's Gambit, originally released in 2018, which had a mixed reception on launch in that it wanted so bad to be a 2D Dark Souls that it negatively influenced the other parts of its design. However, in the months since then, the developers have continued to patch and address issues brought up by the community, such that in 2020, this one is something that you should not miss out on. Brought back from the dead by death itself, execute its will and slay the guardians of the realm. It really hits all of the beats of a Souls game and even has that sweet, high-bit pixel art, so a no-brainer for me. If you have not tried Unworthy, please go ahead and pick it up. This is a very stylish 2D Souls-like Metroidvania using the monochrome to great effect, and gets points not only for being stylish, but for the awesome combat as well. Similar to Blasphemous above, you're able to tackle all sorts of monstrosities, some with the religious theme, with a variety of weapons and skills at your disposal. Most interestingly, while it looks like a platformer, you cannot jump in this, which makes it feel really different, so dodge roll to your heart's content. "2019 really was a fantastic year for Souls-like games, with Dark Devotion contributing to that sentiment, since this has you playing as a newly appointed Templar, sent to test her faith by descending into an ancient temple and putting her devotion to the test. The combat is the highlight here, with encounters even against the simplest of enemies being thrilling dances of death, which then gets progressively easier, but if you slip up, it's death again. The temple itself is dark and moody, interspersed with blindingly bright areas where you fight against angelic enemies, with such an awesome looking pixel art style as well. A large variety in builds and options round off the package, and is one of the best to do Dark Souls in 2D. Of course, the OG Salt and Sanctuary gets top billing on this list since to date, I've yet to see another game do the 2D Soulslike thing any better. While escorting a princess to a foreign land in a diplomatic arrangement, your ship is assaulted by the eldritch horror and you awaken shipwrecked and alone on an island, so explore and find salvation. This literally manages to translate all of the systems of Dark Souls into 2D, from bonfires, souls, stamina-based combat, RPG and leveling system, equipment and builds, and even the disturbing designs of the bosses. It also manages to be quite the replayable experience with multiple builds and classes to experiment with. A true masterpiece, this takes the #1 spot, and I eagerly await some new title to try and knock it off its perch. If you enjoyed the video, why not share it with a friend? Check out even more great indie gaming videos, and in this current climate, stay safe and I will see you after the jump.